Hello and welcome to Module 2, Section F of the Better with Less course, this one all about your wardrobe. Decluttering one's wardrobe is often a good starting place for people when they're starting to live a more simple life. And whether you've decluttered your wardrobe a bit so far or this is your first time, this section can be very helpful as you are working to not only declutter what you have, but also figure out what your ideal wardrobe is going forward. And because this can sometimes be a more time-consuming process or something that happens over a longer period of time, I also have some guidelines to help you transition your wardrobe a bit slower as you go throughout the different seasons. So I hope this lesson will be helpful. Let's get into it. All right, let's begin the wardrobe section of the course. This is a section where you will likely find a lot of action steps to implement into your lifestyle. And I think you'll also find that for many, it can be an ongoing process. So you may want to come back to these materials in the future. And to begin this section, I want to talk about a 3-tier approach or 3 common types of clothing that we often keep. Of course, you may find that there are additional types of clothing here, but it can be very helpful to sort of categorize the type of attire we have to help us decide what makes sense to keep and what makes sense to let go of. In general, there is the home or personal tier, and that can be clothing that you personally wear around your house. Just at home, often these are going to be the things that are most comfortable, but you're not necessarily wearing them outside the home. There's also work clothes, so these could be clothes that you wear for whatever your job is. If you do not currently have a job, maybe you do not have any clothes for this section. And then there's also out and about clothes. These would be clothing items that you are wearing specifically when you go different places or to events, public spaces, anything like that. These can be 3 common types of clothing. And I know in my own personal life, I have different pieces of clothing for each of these tiers. And while there's definitely some overlap, I find that in general, most of my pieces of clothing fit into one of these key categories. So I encourage you to kind of reflect about what the situation is with your clothing. And I'm also going to be talking about this a little later in this training, but do you have a set uniform for each of these tiers? What do I mean by a uniform? Do you tend to wear the same type of thing in these different contexts? In my own personal life, I have a couple home uniforms. When I'm just staying at home during the day, I'll put on a comfy, simple outfit for during the day, and then I also have my pajamas that I'll put on after I shower in the evening. When I go out and about, I have a few choices that I usually choose between, and having this uniform approach is nice because we have certain go-to outfits or looks that we put together and use. And it can also help prevent decision fatigue, which means we don't have to make as many choices. We can more so grab and go and focus our attention, time, and energy towards more important things. All this being said, we have to start with a minimalist clothing mindset. And as I go over these, I want you to reflect about which of these statements you are currently practicing or where you currently stand on each of these topics. The first component of a minimalist clothing mindset is that my clothing deserves plenty of space. Do each of your clothing items have enough space to breathe and do their thing, or is it all packed together to the point where it's tough for you to find what you need? Another part of the mindset is that the less clothing I have, the better I can take care of it. This statement might resonate with you if you find that you have too much clothing that it makes laundry a chore. Maybe you aren't properly storing or hanging up your clothing like you should be, or in the way that that piece of clothing is supposed to be taken care of. Does your clothing enhance your confidence and make you feel amazing? Ideally, many of us want this. We want to feel comfortable in what we're wearing, and we want to feel good about ourselves in it. Unfortunately, though, a lot of clothing doesn't do that. And although we might think that it's important to hold on to some of these items just because we have them, we do want to think mindfully about this and maybe can use this as a perspective to shift our mindset going forward. Another mindset would be I wear my favorite clothing every day by keeping only my favorites. When we keep less clothing, we can choose the better clothing, so overall there's a lot more enjoyment that can come out of those pieces. Finally, buying less clothing means I can buy better clothing. When shopping for clothing, fast fashion brands are the most affordable, but they come with other costs. Not only do these items fall apart or do not last nearly as long as higher quality counterparts, but there's also negative social effects that go into the production of these clothing items. When you start to shop more intentionally, you're much more likely to purchase one high quality piece of clothing rather than 5 alternatives that aren't going to last as much. We can view shopping much more intentionally, and that can help you long term. So those are all elements of the mindset here, but I wanted to get into some decluttering methods. Now, your homework sheet for this week does include a more detailed printable about these methods, so you don't necessarily have to return back to this slide. But 5 common methods to help you declutter your clothing include the 3-pile method, where you're sorting out between yes, no, and maybes. Decluttering by type, which is where you declutter items based upon what type of clothing it is. For example, decluttering t-shirts, decluttering pairs of pants, decluttering activewear, etc. There's numeric decluttering, where you're breaking down a numeric value or numeric goal of how much you want to let go of. Maybe it's 10%, maybe it's 10 items. It's up to you. There's the capsule wardrobe. Here you're breaking down key number of items that can be mixed and matched and worn in different combinations, and you're really trying to choose to wear only those items during that particular season or whenever you have that capsule wardrobe. Finally, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, there's the create a uniform approach, where you have a set uniform that you wear and you don't necessarily need to rely on your other items. So I hope you'll find these methods to be helpful, but again, be sure to check out the homework sheet for some helpful tips and more detailed walkthroughs of these different methods. One important thing I've noticed though in my own journey to simplify my clothing, as well as with others, is that while you can certainly let go of so many of these clothes right away, for many it makes more sense to take a more gradual approach to simplifying one's wardrobe. There's definitely work that can be done right away, but to really get to the place that you want to be with your wardrobe, it takes time. And during this time, we can focus on making gradual changes both to the actual clothing ourselves, as well as our own personal mindsets and attitudes towards clothing. Because not only is the clothing what we wear, it also leads to a lot of different mental challenges, and maybe there's challenges related to our weight or maybe our own self-confidence. Maybe we have some negative ideas towards these different things. So a transition over time. Let's take a look at that. Begin first by removing any obvious no's. If there are pieces that you never wear, that you strongly dislike wearing, and that are not comfortable at all, get rid of them now. Hopefully that will help remove some of the excess bulk from your wardrobe, and then you'll be able to continue making more intentional choices more easily because some of that stuff is gone. Next, go through your items on a seasonal basis or whenever it works for you to gradually remove pieces. And you can use any of the decluttering methods we've already talked about during these times. I think seasonally is a great opportunity to do so because not only are you probably wanting to open up some more space in your wardrobe for the current pieces you'll be needing, but also you just came off of the last season and you can identify whether you wore certain items or not. If it's starting to be warm weather and you have a bunch of sweaters that you didn't wear at all during the winter, is it worth letting those go? Perhaps. As much as possible, put your clothing to the test that you currently have. And how do you do this? This is by wearing it more regularly. And reflect how you feel when you're wearing it. This can help you identify if it's worth keeping. And I cannot emphasize this enough. There have been plenty of pieces of clothing where my ideal self wanted to keep them, but when I actually wore them, sometimes once, sometimes twice, sometimes even 3 times, I realized that it wasn't worth it. And there was something holding me back to why I didn't wear it more often. And even if I felt upset at first that I had spent the money on it or had originally thought it was a good purchase, I knew that the right thing to do was let it go because I was not going to get value out of that item in the future. Going forward, any purchases that you do, make sure they are intentional for you as you are right now. Not that person you want to be in the future, but as you are right now, and that those items are truly needed. If we can dramatically limit what's coming in, we'll be able to make those gradual changes, especially if you don't feel like the wardrobe you currently have is the wardrobe that you ideally want to have and that makes the most sense for you. Finally, another great transition option is to practice the 1 in, 1 out rule, or maybe you consider doing 1 in, 2 out, etc. Under this logic, if you bring something new into your wardrobe, that means you are letting go of another item that is similar or, whatever, if it's 2 or 3 other items. These can help you as you transition. But remember, however you choose to do it is fine. This is your approach. This is what's best for you. So do some reflection and think through these options. Of course, I highly recommend checking out the homework for this section. This homework can help you develop a clothing philosophy for yourself, help you take some action steps, and help you move in the right direction. And as I mentioned before, it does do a more detailed walkthrough of the decluttering methods I talked about in this video today. Keep up the great work as always, and I will see you in the next lesson.